Hello, my name is Arthur, and I'm 65 years old. The story I'm about to share with you is one I still find hard to believe in myself. It's a story about loss, about family, and about how sometimes the quietest truths can make the loudest noise. It all started on the day of my ex-wife's funeral, a day that would change everything I thought I knew about my life. My son sat at the reading of the will with a smug smile on his face, absolutely convinced that after 15 years of silence, I would get nothing from his mother's $34 million inheritance. But when the lawyer read one single sentence from that document, everything changed in an instant. The smile completely vanished from my son's face, and he started screaming so loudly that I think the very walls of that old office shook. Before we get into all of that, I'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button for more stories like this one. And please, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. It all began on a Tuesday morning, a morning just like any other. The coffee cup slipped right out of my fingers, shattering against the cheap linoleum floor of my small apartment kitchen. Through the thin wall, I could hear my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, yelling again, "Your blasted sprinklers are flooding my petunias again, Arthur." I sighed and grabbed a dish towel, kneeling down among the ceramic shards. At 65 years old, you'd think I'd be done cleaning up messes, but here I was. The automatic sprinkler system I'd installed for my tiny patch of lawn had developed a loose joint, and every few days it would send a cascade of water right over the property line. I'd tried to explain to Eleanor Gable that I had the parts on order, that I'd fix it as soon as they arrived, but patience was never one of her virtues. Just then, the phone rang. I almost ignored it, more focused on sopping up the coffee that was spreading like a dark stain across the floor. The answering machine would get it, but the ringing just kept going, cutting through Eleanor's ongoing complaints about property values and inconsiderate neighbors. On the fifth ring, I finally stood up, tossing the soaked towel into the sink. "Arthur Hemlock speaking?" "Mr. Hemlock?" The voice on the other end was a woman's, crisp and professional. The kind of tone I'd learned over the years usually comes before some piece of bad news. "This is Catherine Lowe from Finch and Harding Associates in Cheyenne?" "Yes." "I'm calling regarding Evelyn Rose Hemlock." My hand tightened on the receiver. No one had used Evelyn's full name in my presence for at least 15 years. My heart started to pound a little faster. "What about her?" "Sir, I'm very sorry to inform you that Mrs. Hemlock passed away on Saturday evening. The funeral service is scheduled for this Friday at 2 o'clock at Hillside Memorial Chapel." The words felt like a physical blow. I sank down into one of the kitchen chairs, and its familiar squeak sounded unnaturally loud in the sudden, deafening silence of my apartment. Saturday evening. That was 3 days ago. 3 whole days I'd spent worrying about sprinkler parts and coffee stains while the woman I am once promised to love forever had left the world. "Mr. Hemlock, are you still there?" "Yes," I managed to say, my own voice sounding strange and far away. "Yes, I'm here. How did you get my number?" "Your name was listed in Evelyn Rose Hemlock's personal effects as an emergency contact. I understand you were previously married." Previously married. 22 years of life, love, and struggle, all boiled down to a single legal footnote. "Yes," I said, the words coming out automatically, a reflex from years of filling out forms. "We divorced in 2010. "I see," she said. "Well, there will be a reading of the will following the service. You are named as a beneficiary, so your presence would be appreciated." Beneficiary. The word felt completely foreign, impossible. Evelyn had built her empire long after our divorce, transforming the small consulting business she had started in our spare bedroom into a corporate giant I only read about in the business section of the newspaper. What could she possibly have left me? "Mr. Hemlock, will you be attending?" Through the kitchen window, I could see Eleanor Gable still examining her waterlogged petunias, her hands planted firmly on her hips. But her complaints seemed to be coming from another world now, muffled and completely insignificant. "The chapel," I said slowly, my mind trying to catch up. "Which one did you say it was?" "Hillside Memorial on Grand Avenue. The service begins at 2, followed by a brief reception. The reading of the will is scheduled for 4:30 in our offices downtown." I found myself nodding, even though she couldn't see me. "I'll be there." After I hung up the phone, I just sat there in that hard kitchen chair, staring at the phone as if it might ring again and tell me it was all a mistake. The coffee stands on the floor had already started to set, forming dark rings that I knew would take a lot of scrubbing to get out. But I couldn't move. I couldn't seem to process the simple, unbelievable fact that Evelyn, vibrant, stubborn, impossible Evelyn, was gone. The afternoon light slanted through the window, illuminating tiny dust motes dancing in the air like ghosts of memories I had tried so hard to forget. As I sat there, the name Evelyn Rose Hemlock echoed in my mind, and each syllable pulled me backward through time, all the way back to a snowy February evening in 1987. I was sitting in a booth at Murphy's Diner, and I saw a woman in a bright red wool coat arguing with the manager about his hiring practices. She said, "Are you honestly telling me that you won't consider female applicants for the weekend manager position because, and I quote, 'women can't handle the pressure'?" She shook her head. "That is the most ridiculous, outdated thing I have heard all week." I stopped mid-bite of my apple pie, my fork just hanging in the air. The woman turned slightly and I saw her profile. Sharp cheekbones, a determined jaw, dark hair that caught the diner's fluorescent lights. She was absolutely magnificent in her anger, and I found myself hoping the manager would keep arguing just so I could hear her dismantle his flimsy logic. The bell on the door jingled and she left, and the whole diner suddenly felt smaller, as if she'd taken all the electricity in the room with her. I watched through the window as she got into an old blue Honda Civic, and I noticed how she checked her mirrors twice before pulling out into traffic. She was careful, methodical, but completely unafraid to fight for what she believed was right.
"That one's trouble," the manager muttered, loud enough for the few of us in the diner to hear. I stood up, leaving a $5 bill next to my half-eaten pie. "No," I said, surprising myself with how certain I sounded. "That one's extraordinary." The business card was still lying on the counter where she'd left it. Evelyn Chen, business consultant. I memorized the phone number before I stepped back out into the cold February wind. It took me 3 days to work up the courage to call her. When I finally did, she answered on the second ring with a brisk, "Evelyn Chen? This is Arthur Hemlock. We haven't officially met, but I saw you at Murphy's Diner on Friday night." There was a pause. Then she said, "The man with the apple pie who defended my honor to the manager after I left? You heard that? I was just getting my gloves from the car. You also left a very generous tip." I could hear the smile in her voice. "So, Arthur Hemlock, what can I do for you?" "Have dinner with me," I blurted out. "Somewhere better than Murphy's." There was another pause, this one a little longer. "Are you asking me out on a date, or do you need some business consulting?" "Definitely a date," I said. "Though, if you have any advice on how to convince beautiful, intelligent women to have dinner with complete strangers, I could probably use that consultation too." She laughed, a real warm laugh, not the polite little sound women sometimes made when men were trying to be charming. "Saturday night, Romano's on 3rd Street, 7 o'clock, don't be late." She wore that same red coat to dinner, but underneath was a simple black dress that made my heart race. We talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Her childhood in California, my job at the power plant, our shared love for old black and white movies, and our shared dislike for modern art. When she laughed at my story about the time I accidentally flooded my apartment trying to fix a leaky faucet, I knew, right then, that I was falling for her. 6 months later, I proposed in that very same diner. sliding a small ring across the same counter where she had left her business card. "Marry me, Evelyn Chen. Make me the luckiest man in Wyoming." She said yes before I even finished the sentence. Our wedding day was blazing with September sunshine, the kind of perfect day that makes you feel like any promise is possible. Evelyn wore her grandmother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and she carried a bouquet of wildflowers we'd picked together that morning from a field near my apartment. My hands shook as I slipped the simple gold band onto her finger. "Forever," she whispered, and in that moment, I believed her completely. Our son Marcus arrived 2 years later, a tiny, squalling miracle who turned our quiet little house into a place that was alive with purpose and joy. I remember standing in the hospital room, watching Evelyn cradle our son with that same fierce determination she brought to everything she did. And I thought to myself that this one perfect moment was all I would ever need in my life. But even then, as she held our perfect baby, I noticed how her eyes would occasionally drift to the business magazines someone had left on the nightstand. As Marcus grew from a toddler into a schoolboy, I started to notice things I'd missed in those first few blissful years. When he turned 7, Evelyn bought him a computer. Not a toy computer, but a real machine that cost more than my monthly salary. "He needs to understand technology, Arthur," she explained, her eyes glowing as she watched him navigate programs I'd never even heard of. "The future belongs to the kids who can think digitally." I had suggested teaching him how to fish instead. She laughed, but it wasn't a kind laugh. By then, we'd moved to Hillcrest Avenue, into a house with 3 bathrooms and a kitchen island bigger than our old apartment. Evelyn's consulting firm had landed a massive contract with a mining consortium, and suddenly we had money for things I never even knew existed. A housekeeper started coming twice a week, our refrigerator dispensed crushed ice through the door. Marcus's bedroom looked like the inside of a toy store. "Isn't this wonderful, darling?" Evelyn asked me one evening, gesturing around our new dining room with its giant crystal chandelier and a table that could seat 12 people. I found myself missing our old, scarred kitchen table, the one that bore the marks of years of Marcus's coloring projects and our own late-night talks. This new table was so polished it reflected light like a mirror. It demanded coasters and placemats and hushed voices. The entertainment started almost immediately. Business associates, potential clients, other successful couples whose entire conversations seemed to revolve around market share and investment strategies. I'd put on my best shirt and try to contribute, but when the talk turned to hedge funds and corporate restructuring, I felt like I was trying to speak a foreign language I'd never learned. "Arthur works at the power plant," Evelyn would explain when someone new asked what I did, and for the first time, I heard something new in her voice. It wasn't pride anymore. It was a faint, apologetic edge, as if my steady, honest job required some kind of excuse. Marcus, however, thrived in this new world. At 10 years old, he could discuss computer programming with Evelyn's tech-savvy clients. At 12, he was critiquing the wine choices at restaurants I couldn't afford to eat in on my own. By the time he was 14, he would roll his eyes whenever I suggested a family camping trip, much preferring to go with Evelyn to her business conferences in Denver and Salt Lake City. "Dad just doesn't understand," became his favorite phrase, usually delivered with the exasperated sigh of someone who felt he was far too sophisticated for such mundane concerns. The first real fight, the one that felt like a crack in the foundation, came on Marcus's 15th birthday. Evelyn had planned a party that looked more like a corporate networking event than a teenager's birthday party. There was catered food, hired entertainment, and a guest list filled with her business contacts and their impeccably dressed children. I had wanted something simpler, maybe just a barbecue in our own backyard with his actual friends from school. "This is embarrassing, Evelyn," I told her the night before, watching the servers arrange these elaborate flower arrangements all over our house. "He's 15, not 50. "He's growing up in a different world than we did, Arthur," she replied, adjusting a centerpiece with the same laser-like precision she brought to her contract negotiations. These connections matter. These relationships will shape his entire future.
What about just letting him be a kid? I asked, a knot tightening in my stomach. She turned to face me fully then, and for the first time I saw something truly cold in her eyes. It was a calculation where warmth used to be. Being just a kid is a luxury we can't afford to give him, Arthur. The world is competitive. We either prepare him to win or we prepare him to lose. It's that simple. I thought about my own 15th birthday. It was a fishing trip with my father, a homemade chocolate cake, and presents wrapped in the Sunday newspaper comics. It had been perfect in its simplicity. The party was, by Evelyn's standards, a massive success. Marcus charmed the adults, he mingled with their children, and he received gifts that spoke of serious money. New laptops, designer clothes, a mountain bike that cost more than some people's cars. But I caught him once standing alone by the pool, looking completely lost among all the sophisticated celebration. "You okay, buddy?" I asked him quietly. He straightened up immediately, slipping back into the confident persona Evelyn had so carefully helped him craft. Of course, why wouldn't I be? But for just a second, I had seen the confused little boy underneath all that premature sophistication, and it absolutely broke my heart. That party was the beginning of the end, though I didn't see it so clearly at the time. What followed was a slow-motion disaster, like watching a landslide from the bottom of a mountain. It was inevitable, it was destructive, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Evelyn's business consumed more and more of her time, her attention, and her soul. Weekend family dinners were replaced with conference calls. Vacation plans were canceled because of client emergencies. Marcus's school events had to compete with board meetings, and the board meetings always won. "You just don't understand the kind of pressure I'm under," she'd say whenever I complained about her missing another one of Marcus's baseball games. "This business is what supports our lifestyle, Arthur. Someone has to make the hard choices." But I did understand pressure. I understood the pressure that came from keeping a power grid running for an entire city, the pressure of making sure thousands of people had electricity when they flipped a switch. The difference was my pressure served something larger than myself. Her pressure, it seemed, only served her ambition. By the time Marcus graduated from high school, he was a complete stranger to me. Evelyn had groomed him into her perfect protégé, sharp, ambitious, and completely dismissive of anything that didn't directly advance his own prospects. When I suggested he consider a trade school alongside his college applications, just to have a practical skill, he looked at me like I had suggested he become a medieval serf. "Dad, that is exactly the kind of small-minded thinking that's held you back your whole life. You settled for mediocrity. I refuse to make that same mistake." Those words, they hit me like a physical blow. Settled for mediocrity. As if my 25 years of keeping the lights on for our entire community meant nothing. As if being a steady, present father was somehow shameful. College only made everything worse. Marcus chose business school, Evelyn's alma mater, of course, and he would come home for holidays full of new theories about market dynamics and personal optimization. He would look at our home, our life, our values with this barely concealed contempt. "You could do more, Dad," he'd say, as if my contentment was a personal failing he had to point out to. "Mom started with nothing and built an absolute empire. You've had the same job for 20 years. "Some things matter more than money, Marcus," I'd reply, but he had already stopped listening. The final explosion came during his senior year of college. Evelyn had been working 100-hour weeks trying to finalize some massive acquisition deal. I'd been handling everything at home, the grocery shopping, the laundry, all the mundane, invisible tasks that keep a life running. When she missed Marcus's college graduation because of a client crisis, I finally said what had been building inside me for years. "This is enough, Evelyn. Family has to come first sometimes." She was standing in our kitchen, that monument of granite and crystal she'd built up to her success, still wearing her business suit at midnight, checking emails on her phone. "Don't you dare lecture me about priorities, Arthur. Everything we have, everything Marcus has accomplished, it exists because of my work." "What about everything we've lost?" I asked, my voice shaking. "Like what?" She finally looked up from her phone, and she seemed genuinely puzzled. "Like us. Like being a family instead of a corporation." She stared at me for a long, silent moment, and I saw the answer in her eyes before she even spoke the words. We weren't a family anymore. We were a business arrangement that had outlived its utility. "Maybe it's time we stopped pretending this is working," she said quietly. The divorce took 6 months. Evelyn's lawyers were efficient, professional, and utterly devastating. I got the small house on Maple Street, our old starter home that she had kept as a rental property, and just enough money to live modestly. She got everything else, including Marcus's unquestioning loyalty. "You're holding him back, too," Marcus told me during one of our last conversations before he moved to Denver to work for Evelyn's company. "All this guilt you have about family values and simple living, it's toxic, Dad. I can't be around that kind of negativity anymore." I sat alone in my empty house afterward, surrounded by boxes of memories from a life that apparently meant nothing to the people I had loved most in the world. And now, 15 years later, the afternoon light was fading outside my apartment window. My coffee had grown cold. The ceramic shards from the broken mug were still scattered on the floor. Somewhere across town, funeral preparations were underway for the woman who had once promised me forever. And I had absolutely no idea why she had even remembered my name in her will. The service was held at a chapel that sat on a hill overlooking the town. Its stone architecture suggested a kind of permanence and prosperity I no longer felt a part of. The parking lot was filled with expensive cars, Mercedes, BMWs, a few Teslas, and I parked my 15-year-old Honda between a Lexus and a Cadillac, feeling like an intruder at someone else's party. I slipped into a back pew, hoping to remain invisible, but my arrival sent ripples through the room. "That's her ex-husband," I heard someone whisper. "Can you believe he showed up?" Then a voice cut through the murmurs like a blade. "Dad!" I looked up to see Marcus striding down the aisle, his face a mask of disbelief and barely controlled anger. At 37, he looked exactly like his mother, sharp, commanding, and radiating success. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice loud enough to turn every head in the chapel. "I came to pay my respects, Marcus," I said slowly. "But you lost the right to do that 15 years ago," he hissed, moving closer. "She wouldn't want you here." "Maybe not, but I needed to be." "For what? To ease your conscience?" He spun around to address the 200 silent onlookers. "I apologize for this disruption," he announced, his voice practiced and authoritative. "My father seems to have forgotten that divorce means you're no longer family." He gestured toward me with a dismissive wave. "This is Arthur Hemlock, the man who spent 22 years holding back one of the most brilliant women this town has ever produced. While my mother was building an empire, he was content to punch a time clock and complain about her ambition."
"Marcus, that's enough," I said, my voice firmer than I intended. "Is it?" he shot back. "Because I think these people deserve to know why you're really here. He took half her assets in the divorce, despite contributing nothing to her success, and now that she's gone, he shows up expecting sympathy." Each word was a blow, a public stripping of my dignity. I stood there, exposed and judged, but I refused to be driven away. "I loved your mother," I said, my voice carrying through the silent chapel. "For 40 years. I'm not here to make claims. I'm here to honor the memory of the promises we once made to each other." I sat back down. Marcus, momentarily thrown off by my refusal to crumble, shot me a look of pure contempt before taking his seat in the front pew, reserved for family.
The service was a blur of eulogies that painted Evelyn as a saint of industry, a visionary who overcame all obstacles. When it was over, people filed past to offer condolences to Marcus, pointedly ignoring me. I was about to slip out when a man in an expensive suit approached me. "Mr. Hemlock? Mr. Alistair Finch from Finch & Harding. Could I have a word with you and Marcus? There are some matters we need to discuss regarding Mrs. Hemlock's estate." We walked the few blocks to his office in a tense silence. The office itself was exactly the kind of place Evelyn would have chosen. Top floor, dark wood, leather-bound books, an air of established success. We sat in 2 leather chairs in front of a massive mahogany desk. Marcus leaned forward, eager and expectant. I just felt tired. Mr. Finch cleared his throat. "This is the last will and testament of Evelyn Rose Hemlock," he began, his voice formal and steady. "To my beloved son, Marcus Evelyn Hemlock, I leave the family home at 847 Hillcrest Avenue, along with all furnishings and personal property." Marcus smiled, a satisfied, knowing look. Mr. Finch continued, "Additionally, I bequeath to Marcus the sum of $500,000. Marcus's smile flickered. It was a lot of money, but he knew his mother's business empire was worth vastly more. "And the company?" he asked, a note of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "I'm continuing with the specific requests, Marcus," Mr. Finch said calmly. "Please allow me to finish." He turned a page, and his gaze shifted, for the first time, directly to me. Something in his expression made my stomach clench. "To my former husband, Arthur Michael Hemlock, I bequeath the sum of $33.5 million. The world tilted. I felt the air leave my lungs. There must be a mistake," I stammered. "Additionally," Mr. Finch continued, his voice unwavering, "I transfer to Arthur controlling interest in Hemlock Consulting Solutions, including all subsidiary companies, real estate holdings, and business assets. This transfer includes 65% ownership and an appointment as chairman of the board." "No!" The word exploded from Marcus. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently against the floor. "This is impossible! What did you do to her?" he screamed, his face contorted with a rage that was terrifying to see. "How did you manipulate her?" "I didn't do anything," I said weakly, my own mind reeling. "I haven't spoken to your mother in 15 years. "Liar!" he shrieked. "People don't just give away an empire to the man who abandoned them." He slammed his hand on the desk, scattering papers. "This is fraud. She was sick. She was compromised." "Mr. Hemlock," the lawyer said, his tone firm, "I must insist you control yourself. Your mother was of completely sound mind when she executed these documents. She underwent a thorough mental competency evaluation precisely to prevent these kinds of challenges." He paused, then added, "She also left a personal message. It was her wish that it be read after the will." "A message?" Marcus's laugh was a bitter, broken sound. "She cuts me out of everything that matters and leaves him a message?" "The message is for both of you," Mr. Finch corrected gently. He reached for a cream-colored envelope with Evelyn's familiar, elegant handwriting across the front. The room fell silent again, the air thick with anticipation, and my son's barely suppressed fury. My own heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. And explanation. Maybe, finally, I would understand. Mr. Finch opened the envelope and began to read, and as he did, it felt as if Evelyn herself were speaking in the room. "My dearest Arthur," he began, and the words were so perfectly Evelyn that a lump formed in my throat. "If you are hearing this, it means I'm gone, and you are probably sitting in Alistair's office, wondering if the entire world has lost its mind. I can just picture your face. That confused but trying to be polite expression you always got when I'd rearranged the furniture without telling you." Despite myself, a small, sad smile touched my lips. She knew me so well. "I know this inheritance is a shock.
I know you're thinking you don't deserve this, but Arthur, you are wrong. You deserve every penny. I never stopped loving you. Not during our worst fights, not during the divorce, not during these 15 years of stubborn, prideful silence. I was angry with you, yes, for not understanding my ambition, but I was always angrier at myself for choosing that ambition over our marriage. You tried to save us. You begged me to find balance, to remember what really mattered. I was too proud and too afraid to listen. Tears were starting to well in my eyes, hot and unexpected. I could feel 15 years of guilt and regret begin to dissolve under the warmth of her words. Marcus, my beautiful, brilliant boy, I know you are furious right now, convinced your father somehow manipulated me. But my love, you are not ready for this inheritance. Not yet. You have lived your entire life in the shadow of my success, enjoying the benefits without ever truly understanding the weight of responsibility. You've spent 15 years hating a good man for crimes he never committed. That's not true, Marcus whispered, but his voice was hollow. Your father, the letter read, taught me about character, about integrity, about a kind of quiet strength that doesn't need to announce itself. I forgot those lessons for a while when I chose money over our marriage, but I was always angrier at myself for choosing that ambition over our marriage. You tried to save us, Arthur. You begged me to find balance, to remember what really mattered. I was too proud and too afraid to listen. When Mr. Finch finished reading, the office was profoundly silent. I sat there with tears streaming down my cheeks, overwhelmed by the impossible grace of her final words. Marcus just stared at the floor, his entire world, his entire identity shattered around him. He was the first to speak. "This isn't over," he said, but the fire was gone. "I can contest this." "You could," I said gently, looking at the broken man who was still my son. "But your mother was right. You're not ready." "And you are?" he sneered, a last flicker of his old arrogance. "You're a nobody, a retired power plant worker." The old Arthur might have agreed with him, but this new Arthur, the one who held Evelyn's final words in his hands, felt different. "Maybe you're right," I said, standing up. "Maybe I don't know the first thing about running a business empire, but I know something your mother came to value more. I know the difference between serving others and serving myself." He left without another word, the door clicking shut behind him. I looked at Mr. Finch. "Did she really?" He smiled, a kind, genuine smile. "Arthur, every time we met to discuss her estate, she talked about you. Not the divorce, but the man who taught her that success without character is just an expensive, empty failure." I walked out of that office a different man. The sun felt warmer, the air cleaner. I had a company to learn about, a legacy to honor, and responsibilities I never asked for, but now felt strangely ready to embrace. Justice, I realized, wasn't about winning or losing. It was about recognition. The recognition that a quiet life of integrity matters, that love, real love, can find a way to speak its truth even after it's gone. Evelyn had seen that. And in her final, astonishing act, she had given me the chance to prove her right. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a like, subscribe to the channel for more, and I'd love to read your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.